Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, in this episode, I want to talk about coaching.
I'm a big fan of talking about coaching, so I like this idea.
We've talked about coaching before, just in terms of the importance of it and how much of leadership is effective coaching compared to what it was maybe 10 or 20 years ago. And it's significantly more now than it used to be, of course. But what we haven't really talked about before is that there are different styles or types of coaching, and not just from different avenues. Like it's not just like sports coaching versus business coaching. I mean, there are different ways to coach a person on something they aren't as good at as they need to be good at for whatever job that they've been hired to do, and coaching effectively might involve several different styles of coaching for the same person over a sustained period of time, because different people need different things. And depending on how much support somebody needs or how good they are already, and how much of this is fine tuning versus, kind of starting from scratch, the relationship that you have with the person matters a lot in terms of the types of coaching or styles of coaching that you should consider available to you. There's a lot that goes into it. And sometimes knowing the right style or type to use is just as important a decision to make as just being good at coaching in general. Because if you just coach in one way for all your people, it might be very effective for some of them, but it might be very ineffective for others. If you happen to be, kind of putting all your eggs in one basket with the style you choose, if that's not what that employee needs at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a great conversation, and there's a couple of things that pop in my head immediately. Like I usually have an analogy, and it's a football like sports reference, but if you think about just in general, if you go to like a practice of maybe a college or a professional football team, what you'll tend to see is a handful of coaches in very different positions. And the first one you'll typically see is a coach who's like on the field with the team. And that person is really like they're kind of niche. They're maybe working with one segment of the team, but they're really down there focused on very specific movement, body behaviors, play strategies, just making sure that the team is very well versed in practicing specific things that they know are going to benefit them in gameplay. So you kind of have the coach that's on the field. Then you'll have a coach who's on the sideline, and maybe that person is watching a collection of a couple of the segments of the team, or they're making sure that the coach is, each coach in each different area has the team focused on specific tasks and behaviors, and they're kind of ready for these teams to work together, these segments to work together to maybe run a play. So you might have out there on the field an offensive lineman coach, defensive lineman coach, somebody working with those people that kind of block for the quarterback and the running backs and things. And you've got the running back coach, and you've got the quarterback coach, and you've got receiver coach. And so they're all out there doing their own thing. And then this person kind of is like the offensive coordinator, the coach who's in charge of all of them working together. Then you have a coach that may be up in the box of the stadium who's watching the entire field. And they're really kind of dialed into what are they seeing where, what's happening when the teams start to play together. And so I share that because what that means to me is that coaches have to be kind of in different places with a different perspective if you're going to help people get better at what they do. So for me, it starts there. Like you may have to start on the field. You may have to start right next to the person that you want to coach, validating and verifying that they know what's expected. They know what you're asking them to do. You may have to show them what you want them to do, but it's very hands-on and it's very with the person. Then the coach over to the sideline, you may have to maybe be in that space where you're just watching them do what they do, and you're picking up little things, you're picking up themes, you're picking up nuances of how they do the work, what they're doing, maybe even how they're improving upon the things that you've asked them to improve upon, or are they still need some adjustment? Do you have to go back onto the field or get back next to them again and help them out? And then you have the person that's kind of further away watching the whole thing. How is the team working together? How are people kind of ebb and flowing with whatever the expectation is or responsibility is. So again, I share that first because I think that a great coach is capable of having multiple perspectives, but then allowing the spaces for people to be successful, but also jumping in when necessary.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with that. I think in a sports analogy, those are very different people. Like you have they don't typically switch roles on on a day by day basis or hour by hour basis. If you're a leader in a business environment, you might have to do all three. Because you have a team of people that reports to you could be a few people, it could be dozens of people, and you need to be able to watch the high level of everything, like kind of a macro vision of what the team is doing, but you also need to be able to be aware of what individual players or team members are doing, that you can coach them on getting better. And I think depending on who you are, one of those styles might come far easier to you than the other. On the one hand, working with people individually on the specific things that they're not doing correctly, that can work really well for a person if the overarching strategy is a solid strategy and doesn't need work. Then you can rely on, okay, if my people do these things they're supposed to do, then we will win by definition because the strategy is good. And then someone else might, have a easier time on the high level thinking, I'm better around strategy. I just need to be assured that the individual people, they know what they're doing, that they're doing it correctly, that they're working together to do it right, and I can make sure the strategy is in place. And whatever is in your wheelhouse will come easier to you. But you might have to, step out of one role and into another, depending on, where you are on your leadership journey and how many people you have on your team. And the type of coaching that it takes on the first example versus the second, they are very, very different because, one involves significantly more objective based, kind of looking at a situation and reporting on what the behaviors were, the actions. And then the other is significantly more nuanced and it's more of the art of leadership rather than the science of leadership. The art, it would involve, how do you make it so these 10 people who you could look at individually and think, what? They seem to be doing an A- or A job individually, but for some reason we're not winning as a team, so why not? And figuring out what that looks like, and it might mean that the people who you thought were doing things right aren't really doing things right, and you have to go back and fix that. But being able to have that, the ability to look at it through both lenses, without just assuming that that if things aren't working, it must be the other thing that's not working, right? If things aren't working, it must be the strategy because my people are doing everything correct. Or if you're a leader of leaders, the strategy must be perfect. It must be the individual people who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's very short-sighted to go into it thinking either of those things, because in most situations, it's a combination of the two, and the work that needs to be done from a coaching perspective is in both areas.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, because I think that you're spot on with the reality of that most leaders have to wear multiple hats, and they have to be able to adjust what's needed in the moment from the coach, what's needed in the individual's performance or behaviors, or even ways of learning. You may have to adjust the way that you're coaching to help them with the way that they need to learn to be able to be most successful. So I definitely appreciate that. And for me, I think of I kind of have my own philosophy where stepping into spaces like that, I have the 3 Ps, and everybody who knows me knows I love, great acronyms or great ways of remembering things. It makes it easier for me. But the 3 for me when it comes to like coaching people is push, pull, and pause. And what I mean by that is sometimes when you're coaching someone, you realize that they understand they've got the capability to do it. Maybe you've seen them do it. Maybe you've seen them do it a behavior in a different way, but you need to apply it to a new task or do something new. And as the leader, you kind of have to push them forward into that space and kind of give them some, either opportunities, some exposure, say, hey, I have, I've seen you do this. I know you can do this. I'm going to ask you to do this, kind of a little bit of that push to just kind of go out there, make it happen, and give it a great shot, but with full understanding and belief and confidence that you know that they're able to deliver on this and that they will be able to figure it out. So that's kind of the push scenario. The pull scenario is that space where maybe you don't know if they have the confidence. You'd like for them to do the thing. Maybe they have to do the thing. Maybe it's something that is necessary of everyone on the team, or this is the next step for them from a growth standpoint. But you really have to pull them, and so you're going to have to get next to them. You may have to role model for them what it looks like. You may have to explain to them a few different ways to be able to make sure that they understand the expectation. They understand what you're looking for. You may have to show them examples of others where it's gone really well or they've had success with a certain style or certain way of getting things done. But you really have to do that with the person. And you're kind of pulling them through maybe where they don't have the confidence or they don't feel that they have the capability just yet. And then the final one is pause. And that's kind of like giving people space to go do the thing. And that could be both. That could be both when you're pushing or when you're pulling. But what that is like once you've given them the help or the direction, once you've kind of gotten them into that space there, you have to give them the room to go do the thing. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel like micromanaging to a degree. If you spend the time in either the push or pull bucket, and then you're like, now I'm going to stand here and watch you. Now I want to see everything that you're doing the entire time. People want that capability, that time and space to be able to practice what they've learned, to be able to figure out a little bit on their own. And then that's awesome when it happens because they get a chance to have that space away from you and then come back and show you what they've done, be proud of it, gain that confidence and that capability. And go from there. And so sometimes in reality is sometimes you do pause and maybe you pause a little too long. Maybe you give a little bit too much space. That's where you may have to check in and validate and you go back to either push or pull a little bit if you need to go do that. But I think it's important to have all three as a means of how you're helping people get to where you want them to go and having them learn what you want them to learn to be really, really successful.
Yeah, I think that's really stellar advice there. And I think the pause part might be the area where a lot of leaders fall short. They want to move forward. They want to see things happening or getting better. They might be, being told by their boss that this needs to change and needs to change quickly. And now they feel like they have to deliver on something and, learning and changing and, altering the style with which you do things doesn't necessarily change overnight unless it's a very simple, procedural thing. But getting better at a skill specifically, if it's not something that you're good at, assuming this is an employee who wants to get better, who's not just phoning it in, but they want to get better, they just don't have the skills, they haven't practiced it. People like that need time to be able to focus on the getting better part without the added pressure of somebody watching in the push or pull mode. And I can speak from personal experience that there's always a part of my mental and emotional capital that doesn't get devoted to actually fixing the problem, but rather gets devoted to making sure the optics are set up correctly for whoever's watching me in the push or pull mode. And so it might make that person think, oh, things are working because they're watching, but it's tantamount to going through the motions as opposed to actually learning how to do something better and executing in a way where it can be replicated over and over and over again without somebody watching. And being able to devote all of my mental and emotional capital into actually getting better and practicing without that added pressure is often needed in order to get better at something. And, knowing that there's going to be a time in the future, whether it's a few days or a few weeks or whatever, where that person's going to be watching and they're going to be back into push or pull mode again. But, if they're a good leader, hopefully they're watching from a distance first and, then jumping in where they think it's needed. And you can tell if you watch long enough, you can tell if where the employee is at a place where they will respond better to a push or a pull type of coaching, just based on watching. You can't just go in there and start with one and hoping it's right, because if it's wrong, you've set yourself backwards a little bit from a leadership perspective versus, taking the time to get it right and meeting the employee where they are. Because that same employee might have needed kind of the pull form of coaching 6 months ago, and now they need a push form of coaching because you're far enough along in the journey where they should be expected to know more.
Yep, absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, for this episode's 1 minute hack, here's what I want you to do. Get very good at knowing the differences between push and pull coaching and when each is appropriate. In general, kind of at a high level, push coaching is less collaborative. It's more you as the leader or the coach prescribing something for someone to do, and then how much involvement or hands-on you have from that point going forward can vary from person to person, or how much specific training they need, or how bought in they are to the process. That can kind of get dialed up or back, and it's still considered push coaching. Pull coaching is significantly more collaborative, and it relies on the employee kind of getting there on their own because of the questions and the experiences that you're providing for them that help them figure it out on their own. Some people really respond better to one versus the other. Some people are like, why are you being cryptic? Just tell me what to do. Others are like, why are you trying to tell me what to do? Like, I don't know. I know this already. And if you know your people, you'll know what type each one is and where they're more likely to feel one way versus another. And the last thing you want to do is to start giving kind of push coaching to an employee who will take it as like they're being talked down to because they are already far enough along in the journey and they know more about it than they need this kind of prescriptive telling of it. They more want the question and answer where they're involved in their own development. And then you have some people who really want that hands-on from their leader, and kind of letting them kind of go through the motions by themselves isn't giving them the support they need, and they're less likely to improve. So be good at both, and then know when to stick that pause in to give them the chance to do things that's appropriate regardless of the style you're using.
Yeah, I think it's great advice, and it's something that I personally obviously use, as I kind of explained. And if it works for you, great. If there's a different style, that's fine too. But I think to your point, like understanding what your people need and how you as a leader need to show up is going to be critical to success when it comes to like people's willingness to be coached to because again, like just by definition, typically when you have somebody that's in a kind of a coaching role, there's this agreement that you have with them, which is like that you want to get better at something, and they're there to help you get better at it. And if you're in that kind of space, then things become a lot easier when it comes to how you are able to support them as a leader and how you can move, in a very positive, quick way. The flip side of that coin is, from a coaching standpoint, is like, people not doing what they're being asked to do, or showing that they don't have consistency in what's expected of them. And that coaching is different. And that is really done with intention of helping people to understand that they have to be able to meet a minimum expectation here in something.
Right.
And you're probably going to lean more into the initial kind of the pushing stage, but you do have to be able to work in the pull stage. You just can't get stuck there with someone if they are continually showing you that they're not willing to themselves work on what you're teaching them. So, but it is something, to your point, that you really have to be conscious and comfortable in both of those spaces to have the success that you want to have longer term.
Right. The true essence of effective coaching requires seamlessly blending the various coaching styles that exist. Just being good at one of them does not mean that you are good at coaching. It just means that the broken clock is right twice a day, right? You will find yourself inevitably in situations where the way that you coach people is effective, because sometimes it just is. But if you aren't good at kind of seamlessly moving between the styles and meeting your people where they are, giving them the coaching that they need, not just the coaching you might happen to be good at in the moment, that's how you build the long-term relationship with them that is needed in order for any coaching to be effective in the first place. And so the more trust the person has in you, the more effective your coaching is going to be, just because the buy-in to the improvement process is going to be there if there's a good relationship built on trust. And so the way, a really easy way to increase that trust and to build that relationship is for the person to have and experience good and effective coaching from you, where you meet them where they are. And the more you do that over time, it's interesting that it's a cycle that kind of builds on itself exponentially. The more coaching you do with a person, typically the more effective it becomes if you've chosen the right style to use, because as that trust goes up, the buy-in to the process goes up, and the person starts to see the fruits of the labor that they're putting in to improve upon the thing that you're helping them to improve on.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.